Hello everyone and welcome to A Billion Ideas with me, Maria Shakil. In a boost, which will be seen as a big boost to the central government, the Supreme Court on Monday upheld the Modi government's demonetisation policy from 2016. The Constitution bench, in fact, dismissed a batch of petitions, around 58 pleas, which claimed the power to demonetize currency lied with the RBI, that is the Reserve Bank of India, and not the central government. The court refused to reverse the policy, calling it within the ambit of the executive's economic powers. 4 judges upheld the legality of the policy, while one judge said it was flawed only on legal grounds, saying the legislation or ordinance route was more valid. The opposition claims the execution of the policy was haphazard and caused multiple problems, something the top court did not touch upon. But the BJP has claimed vindication once again. Since 2016, the BJP has been winning the political war. First witnessed by the party's historic sweep of Uttar Pradesh in 2017. The policy has not cost the party politically at all. But what has been the impact, after effect, and the drawbacks of the demonetisation and the fundamentals of the Indian economy, which just last year emerged as the 5th largest, overtaking Britain? On A Billion Ideas today, we do a deep dive to decode demonetisation.
नवंबर 2016 की रात्रि को 12 बजे से 500 रुपए और 1000 रुपए के करेंसी नोट कानूनन अमान्य होगी।
So first was the strike on 8th of November 2016 when Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the nation. He said that 500 and 1000 rupee notes are being demonetized by his government, that is the central government. Now, what were the policy missions? Number 1, curtailing the shadow economy. Number 2, tackling terror funding. These were seen as the main objectives of this policy. And purging counterfeit cash from the system, also boosting cashless transactions. We are seeing that happen almost every day in our lives. You move around now with just a mobile phone. You really do not need a purse anymore because then the entire transaction has gone digital. Now, what we saw was the immediate effect of the decision of 8th of November 2016. There was a big rush to the banks to exchange banknotes. There were long lines, long queues outside banks for weeks. The market was volatile and there was a drop in industrial production. But the biggest concern certainly was a loss of 1.5 million jobs. But here is the impact the policy has had so far. The tax base and the revenue has expanded by over 68% from 2016 to 2022. You can see that jump. Just look at this. From 7.4 lakh crore to 12.5 lakh crore. There was a boost in ITR filings as well. It ensured more transparency. This boost was seen by over 57% from 4.3 crore in 2016 to 6.8 crore last year, that is 2022. There was a whopping rise in digital transactions as well, from just 100 crore in 2016 to look at that number, 11 lakh crore in 2022. There has been a rise in Jan Dhan deposits by over 300%, from over 44,000 crore in 2016 to over 1.8 lakh crore in 2022, a significant and a huge jump. But here are the drawbacks of this policy. And that's important to decode that as well. In 2016, circulation dipped to 9.4 lakh crore, but in 2022, it was over 32 lakh crore. There was a blow to the GDP with the contraction of the informal sector. 2016 to 2017 saw a steady 8% growth, but the latest data has put the growth below 7%. The rollout of demonetization was clearly not smooth, and the RBI ended up spending 13,000 crore over 2 years for remonetization. So beyond the politics, what is the verdict on demonetization? Joining us, R. Gandhi, former RBI governor. We also have Gurcharan Das, senior economist and author. Vivek Narayan Sharma is advocate on record of the Supreme Court. Also, Bindu Dalmia, she is former chairperson, National Committee for the Financial Inclusion at Niti Aayog. Gurcharan Das, sir, I'm going to begin with you. The majority view of the Constitution bench addressed 6 legal questions, including that there was no flaws in decision-making process. When you look back, what would you say has been the first and the most critical achievement of this policy?
Well, I think you very well laid out the turf. There was a legal aspect, a political aspect, and economic aspect to this decision. The legal aspect, I think the fact is that this was a frivolous thing which should never have been admitted in the court. The reality is it was such a grave decision. The gravity was such. It has to be a sovereign decision of the cabinet and the prime minister. So, yes, the Reserve Bank and others should have been consulted. And ultimately, the decision was a sovereign decision. So, if the people who put up this legal thing had something else in mind, I think they were wrong. Now, the political decision also, the political aspect you've covered very well. There was the UP election, yes, and the BJP won, they won hands down. Then there were many other elections after that. Notebandi never came up as an election issue.
Yes, in fact, I remember, Mr. Das, I was covering the 2017 elections, and people saw this as Amir versus Garib ki ladai. That even the richest men in the country were standing in the queue along with the poorest.
Yeah.
And if anything, this would have ensured, and that has ensured, cleanup of the system. Yes, go ahead, Gurcharan Das.
So, now I just want to come to the more difficult one. That's the economic. When I wear my economist hat, then I feel this was ill-conceived.
Okay.
If maybe with hindsight, but the reality is the right way to have done it would have been to issue 5,000 and 10,000 rupee notes and quietly withdrawn them 2 years later. And those 5, and that's where the rich would have put their money and the poor would not have been affected. You wouldn't have had these long queues at banks and all the hurt. I mean, people lost jobs. The reality is the MSMEs got hurt. And job losses, you put it at 1.5, CMI puts it at 3.5 million. So that is really a very sad thing. And frankly, demonetization did not achieve the objectives that it was set to achieve, but other actions, ironically, of the government, which you just pointed out, the JAM, the Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, which had been around 40-45%, rose up to 80-90% in India.
So when you say
more,
so Gurcharan Das, you're of the opinion that it really did not really achieve
the digitization that took place.
It really did not achieve the objective it set out for. Mr. Gandhi, what about RBI's institutional independence point that was being raised by the dissenting judgment? How do you view that? You'll have to unmute yourself, sir. Mr. Gandhi, you have to unmute yourself. Okay, we'll try and connect with him in just a bit. Ms. Dalmia, come in on this. While we look at multiple aspects of it, Gurcharan Das is of the opinion that yes, in the People's Court, the government won because of multiple electoral victories, and that was certainly the big validation of the policy. Also in the legal court, with the majority judgment clearly saying that it was a decision that the government has, government's decision was in keeping with the doctrine of proportionality, and that the period of 52 days for returning old notes was reasonable. When you look back, again, the question of objectives, what it set out to achieve, would you say it has achieved or still it hasn't? Bindu Dalmia. Ms. Dalmia, if you can hear me. Okay. There seems to be some problem with that line as well. Vivek Sharma, come in on this. Answer that question about the point being made by the dissenting judgment, but the focus certainly is that this is a thumbs up, a big thumbs up to the constitutional validity of this policy.
Surely. See, Myra, as you rightly put, there have been economic benefits, there have been political benefits that the government has wrapped in over the period of time. So you must see that there is a servicing to a vehicle and then there is a overhauling to a vehicle. So the economic vehicle which was running in the country was getting serviced again and again, but then the current, inside current, that black current that was there, it was not going down. So by way of the action of demonetization, that black current had been removed for a period of time, and therefore it means a new current has been circulated in the economy, which is the cashless economy, which is much more formal economy, and then human resource can believe better now after that, because they can receive their payments. Those laborers, they are working in millions with the government projects, and then their payments used to be made in cash. And the cashier who is making the payments to them, they used to deduct certain amounts, means as a right. Now all those payments to those scores of people who are working in public employment,
Vivek, since
they
you
can
are an
directly
advocate
go
of the
to their
Supreme Court,
accounts.
would you say a petition of this nature was needless? And the battle continuing in the court for 6 years?
To that extent, challenging the action was needless, because even in my case, because I had challenged the petition, I had filed the main petition. So I had not challenged the demonetization per se. I had said I am not against demonetization. Rather, I wanted to create more cushion for the people so that the exemptions could be expended. And that's where we had sought certain exemptions, certain more exemptions at that time. The government had also increased those exemptions thereafter. So we had benefited by way of filing the petition, but we had not challenged the demonetization per se.
Okay.
We were seeking the benefit for the people.
Okay, so it was more to do with people or the ramifications of this policy.
Right.
I can see Mr. Gandhi who's back with us, and I'm hoping he'll be able to hear me now. Mr. Gandhi, the question being raised through the dissenting judgment has been about RBI's institutional independence. Do you think that stood compromised, or are you of the opinion that 52 days is a long enough period for that kind of consultation? Because if you look at what the judgment said, that there has been back and forth between the government and the RBI.
RBI's independence, I don't think it has been impacted at all, in the sense that what the dissenting judge had mentioned, as per my understanding, is that RBI's suo moto should have advised the government about withdrawing the legal tender, rather than acting on the desire or the request of the central government. So that I am unable to accept as a policy, in the sense that suggestions can come to Reserve Bank from any quarters, including the government. Even an ordinary citizen can suggest something to the Reserve Bank, and Reserve Bank will, in its own wisdom, in its own using its own expertise, will analyze the request, and whatever consequent action it is supposed to take, it will take. So that way, who has initiated the idea that should not have been an issue at all. It is they always considered opinion or considered conclusions and recommendations, which are important. Here, RBI has come to certain conclusion and recommended to the government. So that way, just because it was mooted by or initiated by the government does not mean that RBI has lost its independence. That's not the way to interpret. That's what my understanding. That's what I would say.
Gurcharan Das, one of the questions and one of the key points of the ruling is, of course, this, that there is an inbuilt safeguard under the RBI Act for demonetization. In fact, the order said that the RBI Act does not provide for excessive delegation. There is an inbuilt safeguard that such a power has to be exercised on the recommendation of the central board. So it cannot be struck down. Do you think for a petitioner such as, Vivek Narayan, who said that it was only the ramifications or the after effect of the demonetization which was at test in the court, all these questions about executive and the independence of the institution should not have been raised at all?
Well, it's a very hard question to know, because it's something inside. We want our institutions to be independent, obviously. We want the Reserve Bank to be independent. We want CBI to be independent. And we don't, it offends us when these institutions become chamchas of the executive. The democratic spirit is offended. So one can't make a judgment. When RBI has said that they were consulted, etc., well, that I'm satisfied by that. It felt like a fait accompli, but when RBI says it's done it, I'm not going to call somebody a liar or anything.
Okay. Bindu Dalmia, the objective, what it set out to achieve.
Yes.
In 2016, we were told that it will ensure that the entire black money and the parallel economy that runs, which will be curbed. But they were also, on the surface and immediate, the impact on the MSMEs, the impact also on the jobs. Do you think we have managed to cover that distance in the last 6 years?
Most certainly, Maria. First of all, thank you for having me on the show, and apologies, I don't know, there was some disturbance. However, coming to your point, when a reform is announced, there is always a lag, and in implementation, in actualization, and the lag can be sometimes months, sometimes years, for it to fructify and to actualize. My point here is that your show, I was going to actually start, because I missed out a lot of your show. I was going to start with another point, which was that your show is titled A Billion Ideas. And allow me to supplement it by stating that there were 3 big bang ideas that were birthed as a consequence of monetization.
That's right.
And also the pandemic party, because we needed to shift to the cashless economy. Today, the e-commerce, fintech, and digital India revolution has changed the way India transacts, as all 3 improved on the ease of doing business and the cost of doing business as we move towards formalization of the economy. To answer your question, did it meet all its desired goals and objectives? No. For example, I feel that the cash to GDP ratio is still high compared to tax to GDP ratio is still high compared to the OECD average of 34%. We are at about 10.8% in FY22. These are areas of improvement, which is cash to GDP and the tax to GDP. Also, the cash to GDP remains high.
Yes, ma'am. Would you say then that in terms of it being bold, that it requires a lot of political capital for a government to take a move of this nature? They would have calculated the risk at hand. They would have calculated that a country of 1 billion people, if they are told that their savings, which is in particular note and currency, is no longer valid, that actually it can go anywhere. It can go in any direction.
Maria, let me put it this way. It was a painful period of readjustment and degrowth, no doubt. But it led to just a temporary economic shock. The long-term gains were much higher than the risk. And the political capital Modi ji had was phenomenal for him to take that leap. That leap of faith was vital to move towards a cashless economy. Because we saw the benefits of it thereafter, that there was an increase in gross national savings. It led to better credit quality. It led to to lowering of taxes and interest rates. So there were a lot of benefits. You cannot deny that. Today we clocked the highest amount of digital transactions.
Yes.
In the world, globally.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Also, Maria, it is one of the global best practices. It's a paradigm for other countries to emulate how we moved towards digitization.
Yes. And it had to, then let me start, winding up this debate, and I'm going to begin with you, Mr. Gandhi. Would you say that all the questions got answered, particularly of the validation that the BJP got and Prime Minister Narendra Modi got from the people of this country? Yes, they suffered. Yes, they stood in long queues. But when it came to voting for him, they came out to vote for him.
That's basically a political question, as Mr. Das mentioned also. So that beyond my view. But in general, I do consider that way, that yes, it has been endorsed generally by the public.
So you feel this has got the endorsement of the public. What about Vivek Sharma in terms of objectives and the final outcome?
See, there are two very important things. India went up 58 positions in ease of doing business. The terrorism incidents have reduced by more than 30% in last several years after demonetization. The economy has expanded into a bundle of cashless, and then we are seeing that we were COVID ready when the COVID happened. And I want to clarify, there were few petitions which were there to challenge the demonetization at that time, and the judgments have come on those petitions. And then with regard to 52 days period, 52 days period was for the exchange.
Yes.
The Supreme Court recognized that there was a consultation for 6 months between RBI and the government.
Yes.
And thereafter the decision of demonetization was taken. So this is just to clarify the factual situation.
All right. Gurcharan Das, and I'll give the final words to Bindu Dalmia. Mr. Das.
Well, as I've said, I think that legally, this is fine. Politically, it is fine. Economically, though, it was not a sound decision. And frankly, the other steps the government took, all the other things that the people have quoted on this panel, all the benefits, they were the results of other actions, of jam, of faceless assessments, of
Okay. There seems to be some problem with that line. Bindu Dalmia, I'll give you the final word. Ma'am, would you say then that, yes, there were 3 legislation that followed it. One was on black money, and there were other, move particularly for digitization as well. So, when you look back again at those 6 years, everything was thought out. So, perhaps when the move was announced on 8th, the roadmap of legislation had been decided much ahead.
Sure, it was decided, and with a lot of consideration with this legislation and a lot of consultation with the RBI went in according to the central government. We don't doubt it. There were a lot of backward and forward linkages that the government had thought out. It may not have happened to perfection, and it did cause temporary disruption and inconvenience, but the long-term gains and the political gains were phenomenal for the government, which has been seen in election after election, Maria.
So I've just
in the general election and also there's been a mindset change in India, the way we transact with or our attitude towards black money. The incidence of there's a mindset shift in ethics, personal and corporate ethics, that people want to be tax compliant. They do not want to deal in land or jewelry or luxury goods in black money anymore. It's been minimized to the extent possible. Has it been totally weeded out? It cannot happen in even 6 years. It is an ongoing process and a work in progress.
All right. Thank you so much for your time here, ma'am. Bindu Dalmia, Gurcharan Das, R. Gandhi and Vivek Narayan Sharma. Of course, as I said, in the People's Court, the government got a big thumbs up long ago. Soon after November 2016, it won Uttar Pradesh with the biggest mandate ever. And then what we saw was one victory after another. Also, the Lok Sabha election victory of 2019. And then came the legal validation from the Supreme Court. I'll be taking up another issue that affects a billion of us next week. Thanks so much for watching.